But as you think about the fear of putting this together, is just the, hey, I don't want to underestimate staffing level or be ridiculous. Is that the kind of core of the question or crossroad?
Yeah. And it's the Goldilocks scenario, right? I don't want to overestimate too much either, because that means I have to give up more ownership.
Scratch Entrepreneur. True stories of remarkable people who dropped everything to turn an idea into a healthy, profitable business. While I don't have a traditional tech startup myself, I have kind of a love-love relationship with the tech world. Maybe it's because tech is the new American dream. To have an idea that solves a pain point in the world, build a model, have a bunch of tech stuff happen, and voila, you're a millionaire. One version or another of this story, the story of magically different life than you have right now, has captured the American imagination from its infancy. The very act of immigrating, sailing in a ship for months to the New World, is that story. The Industrial Revolution is that story. And now, from our Commodore 64s and Ataris to the podcast you're listening to right now, we all love to believe that magic can happen. So I do love talking with tech entrepreneurs, to hear the pain point they're solving, to dig deep into the nuts and bolts of what it means to raise huge sums of money based basically on nothing besides the founder's word and a compelling deck of PowerPoint slides. And then build the thing and launch the thing and raise more money and grow. Or conversely, to fail miserably, to miss one key point, to just miss a fundraising goal, to not realize a subtlety of your ideal client. Tech is the wild, wild west, and I love every chance I have to be a part of it. So today we dig into it. Deep into one specific issue that every tech business lucky enough to actually launch their product faces: how to budget for the first year of a product actually being live. We're glad you joined us. Hey, this is Jeremy Goodrich, owner of Shine Insurance Agency and your host for the Scratch Entrepreneur Podcast. Today's show is the second in our Crossroads series. In these episodes, we're going to help our guests get to the bottom of an issue or decision that they've got to deal with. You know, who to hire, what the right way to spend marketing dollars is, how to build a niche, and on and on. The next hour is a real live coaching session, and you get to listen in. But since I'm clearly not a business coach, we brought in a much more talented, much more experienced, and much better looking executive business coach to have the conversation. David Quick is our business coach extraordinaire. He's run businesses, scaled businesses, sold businesses, loved and maybe even hated businesses. He's experienced tons of success and plenty of failure too. Now he coaches a select group of entrepreneurs and helps them build the business of their dreams. David has graciously agreed to share his services and co-host the show today. David, thank you so much for being on the show.
Jeremy, thanks so much for having me, particularly the more handsome. I don't know where that came from, but an awesome part of the intro that I don't normally get. So, and I'll highlight clearly the part you reinforced, which is plenty of success, but many, many failures along the way as well.
Awesome. Well, we're so happy to have you. And so let's also introduce our guest. She's actually been on Scratch Entrepreneur before. If you want to check out her show, do so after I tell you who she is. She's one of Bloomington, Indiana's favorite tech entrepreneurs. Her business serves a very specific purpose: to help honey farmers create healthy, happy, productive lives for their bees. Her business is called B Corp, and their products monitor beehive and organize data, helping farmers measure hive strength, productivity, and safety. B Corp has won awards across the tech and agriculture industries, and they're continuing to grow staff and products each year. Ellie Symes is the founder and CEO of B Corp. Ellie, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy. I don't know if I'm the favorite as well.
I think you're a favorite Bloomington
Nice to say.
entrepreneur. What do you say about that, David? I mean, that there's an obvious answer there, but
Yes, absolutely.
okay. So basically, we've got the intros out of the way. The three of us are here hanging out. And Ellie, I wonder if you wanted to intro kind of where your business is at right now, kind of how long you've been working, at what point in your growth phases you're at, so we can get a sense of where the business is at before we dig into what the Crossroads is.
Yeah, so we're actually post an interesting crossroads at the business. So we've been operating for 2 years. And we, this year, received a National Science Foundation grant, which helped us figure out how to take our hive monitoring products, which we're scaling amongst smaller scale beekeepers, into the large commercial space. And in the commercial space, that's where the bees are actually being used to pollinate the crops and used in agriculture. What we learned through that is there is actually a large group of growers that are paying for hive health information. So we've tweaked our technology to serve that market, and we've entered in that space in really the last couple months.
Wow.
So the product is pretty much done. We're post Crossroads there. We're doing a private launch with a group of growers that we've already started to sign up that have helped us with this research. So an interesting post pivot point. And now we're at the point of our business, we're planning for the future. So we know really clear, here's where we need to be by February when the product launches. All of that is crystal clear. What we don't know is what happens beyond. What's the pricing model beyond? How many people are we going to need as we scale this through the ag space? And part of what we do when we do that is we're doing all of our budgeting. We have to plan, what grants are we going to apply to? How much are we going to raise? And to figure out those numbers, you have to know who you need on your team. And that's very hard to do when we are not operating the product yet.
Yeah. And so that's the crossroads you kind of want to dig into today is, you know, you're at this real, would you call it a pre-growth phase? Like you're about to grow a lot. You've already got kind of the things in place. And now you're trying to figure out how this growth is going to happen.
Exactly. I mean, we're technically pre-launch. We're launching right now, but I feel like we have spent so much time on the launch. We get it.
Yeah.
And we now haven't even had the opportunity to spend time on what do we do post-launch, post-February? Where do we go? And that's what, I mean, we've hired an MBA team to help us out with that. We're lost on that part.
So, I mean, you just brought up a bunch of stuff, how you're going to handle this post-launch process. What specific question are you and Dave going to dig into in this conversation?
The biggest what if for us, I mean, we can project our sales very easily, our costs very easily. It's our personnel that it's hard to know what you're going to need till you need it. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we have to budget for it today. And so that's something that I'd love to explore at this crossroads.
That makes a ton of sense. Dave, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it certainly does. We'll, I'm sure, dive into some other stuff. When you talk about staffing and what it looks like, we can look at plenty of ways to think about that. Clearly, there's a drive to how do I get the most talented people I can afford? You know, my metaphorical view, it's always, hey, how do I harness the most power I can for my herd? Ellie, as you know already, your team makes a big difference in how you go forward. So we'll explore that. I think there's some just lingering questions for me. If you understand revenue and cost, what impact or variable cost would headcount be inside that growth? And have you tried to model that, think about that? But we can get into that deeper as we press on.
So Dave, why don't you start by, you kind of alluded to, you still have some basic questions. Like, why don't you start with just asking sort of clarifying questions of Ellie, some basic things you want to understand about her business before you ask the deeper questions that are going to dig into kind of solutions you might have?
Well, I have a little advantage. I've spent some time with Ellie and her team, just understanding kind of where they've been. And it's interesting, as with almost every business, where we start in the first couple steps, thinking, here's what it is, much like even this, I'll call it issue stuff. It's rarely where we start that we find the answers and all those things. So I know in many of my own businesses where we march off toward, we go, well, I thought it was north, but it's actually a little northeast, or sometimes it's even, wow, I thought it was
south,
north, but it's south. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So understand that as you look to the future, Ellie, and understand and start to say, hey, we have launch in February. and you contemplate what that means, is there a sales effort that will scale? What happens in February? And when you say the word launch, what kind of revenue growth? How will it grow? Who grows it? Or is part of that your staffing question as well?
I definitely think sales is a big staffing question. And I've started to try to get advice on when you hire salespeople and those things. Pre-launch right now, it's me. It's Ellie out there building relationships. We really do have good traction in the relationships we've formed with almond growers. We couldn't even service all the people that we're talking to that are interested in the product. So I think to some extent, in 2019 early, a lot of this can be direct and organic from what we've already done so far, as well as, sign up people who've come in for the launch they normally come in for a small subset of their hives, right? Get them to come in for the full amount. But post that, that's definitely a big question for us is, should we even hire sales? Do we need to? I know for me, it's one of the only things I'm doing. I'm spending a lot of time on it, and it is time consuming since in ag, direct sales is very important, especially early on building relationships. And it's a lot of time to call people and talk to them about their dog on the phone for a while. It takes time. So scaling the model is something that we definitely still need to do. Our sales process is still first year. Let's get people to buy this before we try to optimize and make it quicker, easier, faster.
Ellie, clearly I have the advantage of look at your personality assessment, understand your strength. This relationship piece will be easy for you. That will be an easy thing for you to transition, build those relationships, move people forward. When you think about this scaling of sales, and that will directly impact how fast you grow, what and how much staff you'll need. From a sales perspective, it's always good that usually sales can pay its own way, meaning, hey, if Ellie and senior leadership can sell and drive the model to start, that's the way most typical small companies start, meaning owner, founder, leadership team are the salespeople. One, they know the product, the service much better, are able to do that, and just out of necessity. There's not the dollars to say, well, let me go hire a professional sales team. But as you think about your early encounters through this pilot, the pivot, and think about the customers that you've engaged with, when you try to estimate time, effort, length of, I'll call it sales cycle, meaning if you have an almond grower you have a relationship with, you've met them a couple times, and you propose solution, how long will it take them to make that decision? What does that revenue look like? And how much of your time is required? And the way I want you to think about how much of your time is required, meaning, can I handle that? Or no, we clearly need, based on volume we can handle, growth projections, what we need, I'm going to need a team.
Part of me is cringing and looking to the sky because I know all of this is in our pipe drive and recorded, all this data on how long we've spent. I think that's probably the biggest thing going through my head when I think about, are we going to need new sales resources? Because you're exactly right. The founder should be doing it. I actually love doing it. David has met us before I was doing sales and was one of the advisors that said, Ellie, you got to do sales. I don't know why. What are you doing?
We knew that from your personality profile too, that's where you shined, right? And would you say that, David, is true?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I alluded to, that there's a whole subset of founders that, abhor or hate and go, I don't want anything to do with sales. That's not Ellie. But clearly others need help there. And Ellie's will be a question of, hey, is my bandwidth, time, availability that I can put there enough to get to our projection? And what else is required for us to grow at the pace either imposed by you and your team or by outside guidance, board, grants, whatever influence you need to meet. So I'm just curious, when you think about, time to sell one of these accounts, how much of your time is required? And that may be even premature, but do you have a sense of what it will be?
I do. And I know we've been recording this too, not the podcast, these numbers on
Right,
time. Off the top of my head, I'm going to have to estimate it a little bit. It's definitely several phone calls, right? So I have my sales process. It slowly builds that relationship. I'm not picking up the phone on the first call and saying, well, this is what we do and you should buy this. And So it's at least several phone calls to even get them to a point of, hey, we're launching this year. Are you interested? What information do you need to make this purchase decision? The time to get to that and building these relationships, mostly because this is our first year, David, because we have nothing else to back this up with other than trust us, like us, is about, a month to 2 months, right? To have all these conversations. And then when they are making the purchase decision, it's varied. It's been as quick as call me back in 2 weeks. That's when I can meet with my partners and just let them know I want to buy this. It's been as much as, okay, now you need to talk to the actual users of the product and more of an enterprise sales model. So it's probably in that regard anywhere from 2 weeks to a month and a half. And I think I liked your idea of looking at it over projections, because that's definitely, I think, something concrete we could do to say, okay, here's all the time she spent to get to this number in sales. She's going to need to spend 5-6 times that amount to 5-6x the revenue. That would probably be I think a great way to get a sense of, can I handle this? Or go ahead.
Well, what I was going to ask is if you look at kind of what you think your average client that you've engaged with thus far will bring from a revenue standpoint, do you have a gauge of, we're going to need 20 clients, 100 clients, 3 clients to kind of get where you want to be from a scale perspective of revenue? Do you have any idea there?
Yeah, this year we're shooting for about 10 to 20, depending on some of these bigger contracts and how much they come in on. We'd want to be more towards the 10 to dozen range than the 20, just because it's our first year and we really want to handhold. For next year, I think that's something we need to understand more, is how many customers we would need. If I just talk about who we have in the funnel that we're talking to, if they all came in, 1, I couldn't service them this year. It'd be too many people. But 2, it might even be enough for next year and the year beyond. That's something that we need to spend more time on looking at, what that looks like. I know exactly what it is for this year, and it's on our whiteboard in the office, but we haven't spent that much time thinking about 2019 sales.
Awesome. And then if you think about that and say, hey, I carry the majority of that, or you and other folks that are already on board the team, when you think about that burden plus what you're already doing, sounds like, hey, we have the sales targets. The question is, do you need resource outside yourself or the team you have today to close those 10 to 12? Meaning, hey, I know I could if I had the bandwidth. I just don't have the bandwidth because I need to spend this much time doing it. Or is your sense, yeah, I could handle that alongside my other responsibilities?
For this year, it is, I can handle it along with my responsibilities, but I have definitely had to lean on Wyatt, my co-founder, and folks like Gretchen and Gleb, who are on the tech side of the business, to say, hey, I need somebody to take this off my plate so I can spend all afternoon doing sales calls. What we've done as a business is when I don't have the bandwidth, we take away what doesn't have to be Ellie, right? What grant things can Wyatt help with? Gretchen put together a sales sheet on the tech side. She put together the tech specs, So we've started to do that. And I think this year, we can at least get to this year definitely with just Ellie cranking this out and the rest of the team helping spread tasks around.
Well, that's awesome in a lot of ways. Well, I'll ask a couple more questions, but that gives you visibility to scale. It says, here's how hard it is, a real understanding because you've done it, to look and start to project, hey, if I had this many sales reps, there's this many almond growers or equivalent type clients that'll be looking for our service. Here's how long it takes. Here's how many calls. Here's what our, I'll call it, activity to close rate looks. So here's number of leads. Here's number of proposals. Here's number of signs. And this is the typical, pipe drive sales pipeline analysis over time that almost every organization goes through at some level if they have world-class sales engine. The piece I have in that, Ellie, is, are you confident? And the way you know you're confident is someone has someone said, hey, new solution post pivot, we're paying you this amount and we're an active client. Have you crossed that threshold yet?
Yes.
All right. And when you look at those that are, and you say, paying us the price that we would demand in the market, real solution, and you think about the time it took to get that decision, is it still in that framework of, hey, this is, I'll call it 1 to 90 days?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Good. So clearly you can handle the sales side then. I look at that and say, hey, move the team forward. Once you think about selling 10 to 12 accounts this year, what worries do you have beyond that for staffing this year?
On the sales side specifically, you're talking about, right?
I'm talking now outside of sales. So it sounds like, hey, we got enough bandwidth today to sell, get our first 10 to 12 clients. We have visibility to how we do it. We have a product. People are paying us. We understand that. The question becomes, great, to support those 12 by end of year, do I have the team in place that could do that, or do I have staffing needs inside the next 12 months?
Before Ellie answers that question, I'm just going to kind of bring us back into kind of where we're at right now, because I think we sort of jumped a small hurdle in the conversation there. In Ellie's question is how to budget for the future. That's really the entire overarching conversation here. And our questions have been focused on sales, and really great questions around sales. And it kind of seems like David's brought us to a point where for the coming year, it's very possible that you playing that particular role and not necessarily budgeting for other employees to play that role kind of makes sense. Am I putting words in your mouth, Dave, or would you say that's kind of the small conversation we just had there?
Yeah, so I think I agree and disagree. I'm trying to understand, hey, where are they and what will the future budgeting needs be, and help her understand that. So on the front side, I'm just trying to say, all right, well, hey, if they have a repeatable model and they know it, it then becomes a question of budget, meaning, well, how quickly do I need to scale? What's the available market? How much of this could I do? What does that look like? And where's the staffing? That helps drive future cost, how we do it, a bunch of conversation around how to do that effectively. And then there's always the side of, all right, well, now I got to serve clients. So there's always the, I call it first email to sign on. And then we got to serve clients in a remarkable way, or we have this leaky bucket and we're constantly just chasing our tail to keep revenue. And, you know, I know enough about their solution that this is something they're going to go, yeah, I want to use it again next growing season and the growing season after. And once you have installed and there, you provide remarkable service, and it grows like an annuity for your business, Jeremy Insurance. So I'm just trying to understand, hey, what are the other costs and needs as you start to scale? And then this becomes, I don't want to simplify it and call it a math problem, but on a grand scale, it does.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah.
So we've definitely right now slimmed down anything we felt like wasn't necessary for pre-launch. So I do a lot of things like this, recording podcasts, a lot of speaking events. I, a few weeks ago, said no more, and I stopped taking in new ones. So Jeremy got under there before I said no more.
Yeah.
Because that was also something to where I was the person doing that. A lot of the times, unfortunately, people want to hear the CEO. I also love public speaking, so it's my favorite thing to do. But now we're not doing any. Why no one else in the business is taking that on, even if it's not that they don't want to or couldn't be able to, but they're also packed. So that we said, that's not necessary for launch. We don't need to do this stuff. We also discontinued applying for new grants in the next period. So we're not doing any new grants that require any of our time from now until February, unless it's something highly strategic and I apply now and either the competition is in March or April. So we actually had to say that was a lot of Ellie's time as well. That was something I normally did in the business. We have a big second round of this National Science Foundation grant, and that's sort of the other half of what Ellie does in her mornings, while afternoons are sales, and Wyatt has actually helped pick some of that up too. Other things we've just thrown out the door for this year are we get a lot of ideas on, oh, this would be a great addition to the product, right? Or, you know, the user interface side of the application would be great. We really early on said, what's the only thing we need to build to be able to sell it this year? So we focused on the model, the accuracy of the model, and are actually manually going out and taking the images and servicing the picture and building out that front end next year so people can do it on their own.
So you have a minimal viable product that says, hey, we can sell it as is. You're comfortable with that, recognizing, yeah, hey, we could always do more.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And everything just gets thrown on a Trello board.
Yep.
These are not advertisements for Pipedrive and Trello, but they're useful tools.
We use Trello too, absolutely.
That helps me just, Ellie, from the perspective of understanding where you are. If you look at the next 12 months and say, we sell 12 new almond grower accounts at whatever size you think you'll have, do you need to add staff in the next 12 months to support those sales?
That's something that, when I groaned about, customer support, we're not really sure what we're going to do. This year, we'll actually be out in California. We'll be hand-holding the growers through it. So we're going to be really hands-on. I will probably not be doing sales during the 6 weeks that we're operating the product. So Wyatt and I will be in California, out there with growers, a face that they can see. Gleb and Gretchen are going to be behind the scenes, making sure the tech is working, operating that side of the business. Beyond that, this product is going to be something that isn't just used 6 weeks out of the year, and we could shift focus from sales to customer support for that short period of time. It's going to be something that's used by the grower whenever they want. So with that, I definitely think we don't have a clear resource there. I think there's people on the team that could do it. We have actually one of our tech people. He is a relationship-based person, which is very weird, but he's really good as well at model building and software building. That's what he's studied. I think he could be a great technical support person. If the grower has a question that I really can't answer from a tech point of view, he could really take that on and really handhold the grower. But we don't have in our minds yet a dedicated who on the B Corp now is going to do it. That's definitely, I think, something that is going to be a gap area, especially because right now we're not doing it. So we're spending zero time on it. And it's a huge amount of time.
So, Ellie, all of what you've provided is super helpful so far, starts to frame, hey, we understand kind of our sales engine. I still think there's some lingering question on your service side. So one thing to think about as you move that way is, well, where and how do we want to set, I'll call it this service threshold? Are we going to be Nordstrom? Are we going to be Target? Do we want this remarkable service? What does that look like? And how important is that in the space? So is it a self-serve model? Is it an over-the-top model? Look at what that'll require from a staffing level. As you move forward and start to pull together, I'll call it pitch, investor, hey, we're going to ask for money. And on the side of how much we're going to ask, I assume that's where these budgeting questions come from, which is, hey, as I look out into the future and I build a sales forecast and a cost model, how much do I need from an investment standpoint? Is that what's driving the best budgeting question?
Yeah, and especially because salaries are the biggest part of the budget in a software tech company. So it's definitely, if we get that number wrong, our hands are going to be a little tied to who we can hire. If we find out we need 4 people instead of 3, that you need to know up ahead.
So just to get a sense from someone who's not quite in the tech world, you're trying to create this budget and then go out and bring the funds in to match the budget? Or is it like there's funds sitting there that you've already raised that you're trying to make sure go as far as they can go?
So everything that we have in cash right now is already budgeted for. We know exactly what we're spending it on. Okay. This is the first version of what you said. Mm-hmm. When we think about going out and raising more next year, you sort of start backwards. You figure out, just like David's saying, here's the revenue targets we should hit to actually get investors to purchase. Mm-hmm. Here's all the costs associated with that revenue. And then you wrap that up into, okay, I need 12 to 18 months of runway. So this is what all those monthly numbers add up to. And that's what you go out and raise all up front. So it's hard to there's not a lot of flexibility, especially just with the hiring piece.
Okay.
So my bias, Ellie, in all of this, and we can move and get to suggestions. Before I do that, is exactly that, which is, hey, this is all a story, and you know that you've been through some investment rounds already. It becomes, well, how compelling is the story on the demand side? Meaning, here's the market, here's how much we can sell, and here's evidence we can sell. So anything you can do before you go out to the raise to solidify. Here's business model. Here's what we know. We've talked to these almond growers. This model works. They're paying us this many dollars. And that becomes the premise for the upside sales side of the story. And then it just becomes, and I alluded to it earlier, the math equation of here's all the thing. And I realize there's probably fear on your side, and all entrepreneurs go through this, which is, well, do I really know what I need? And so, I'm going to make a recommendation that you lean on other people in terms of staffing levels, but you take your first stab, and always in this stage, overestimate. Say, hey, in my wildest dreams, if I could have the team that delivers awesome, top-notch service, I have a sales team that's going to deliver the number based on the model we have, and crank down your effectiveness, because that's the other thing that I'll warn you, is that your knowledge, expertise, intimacy with all of this, passion as owner, will outperform your average sales rep. So there's a bunch to learn in this that you learn the hard way typically. But as you think about the fear of putting this together, is just the, hey, I don't want to underestimate staffing level or be ridiculous. Is that the kind of core of the question or crossroad?
Yeah. And it's the Goldilocks scenario, right? I don't want to overestimate too much either, because that means I have to give up more ownership.
Yeah. So all of that makes sense. I think as you think about this challenge, is it just that, hey, what's my range of error? How do I do this in an effective way? How do I minimize the dilution in this round? And what can I sell as we go and not have to? And that's the beauty. If you truly understand your sales model, meaning, hey, I know we can go do this and sell this effectively. That's the challenge most organizations struggle with, meaning I'm going to go out to the marketplace and I have no idea what's going to happen. So the more robustly you can answer that question, and I've had plenty of businesses that it took us a while to get that, but by the end you go, hey, I can go into this demographic, meaning a geography that has this many of those, put a rep per this many of those, and expect to see ramp to quota, this many sales over time. As soon as you can do that, it literally becomes a sales question on the modeling and a performance challenge on leading the company, meaning, yeah, can I actually go deliver that? And that's a whole nother conversation. But this upfront is, hey, how aggressive or conservative do I build this model? And what do I not know that I don't know? And all of us as early entrepreneurs, when we're the first employee, second employee, third employee, have no idea. So I get that. I'll make a couple recommendations. Is there anything lingering before we take a break that you go, yeah, hey, but there's something else in this budgeting challenge that we haven't talked about?
The tech people.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing on that side too. It's, we're still going to be in developments. We're still going to need people. We're still going to be doing model improvements. So we still need data science folks. But that's a huge side of it too, is not necessarily like what role do we need, but how many, when, because at some point too, we probably might need to add on that side. And that's, again, hard to do since right now we're in development. We're not in operations. And that's a challenge.
So it's the question of you've got the sales conversation that we've had pretty deeply. You've got the service conversation in some ways, the people that are able to speak with your end user and communicate well with them and then connect with the developers or the inside team. And then the other big piece is the tech piece, which right now is in a development phase essentially and will continue, but will become more of a stability, keeping it going, growing it phase as things shift and are more out in the market. Is that fair to say?
Right. Yeah.
Well, and you have the advantage as well is that you have some people that will help you in town. You have a strong board, some who have lived through these very things that you're getting ready to go through. So I get it. I think we can take a quick break, Jeremy, and come back.
Okay. Well, we're going to do that. We're going to take a real quick break. And when we come back, Dave is going to give us 3 concrete ideas, some solutions that Ellie can walk away with to figure out this budgeting thing. Okay, and we are back with Ellie Symes of B Corps and David Quick of Helping Bulls Thrive in China Shops. We'll have access to both of those folks in the show notes, of course. David's about to jump into some solutions to help Ellie with her Crossroads questions, which is essentially how to budget for the coming year, maybe 2 years, as she goes from the development phase of her tech company into launch and growth. All right, Dave, what do you have for us?
The first phase is I'll call prep of the pitch. So start to frame in your mind, hey, what are my investors, potential investors, current board going to expect from a growth rate perspective? So I've lived in companies where 10% growth per year was perfect and everybody was excited. I've also lived in environments where we, the management team, said we need to double every year. And the year I joined the company, we were 50 million in sales. So you quickly go 50 million, 100, 220, 220, 400. And, when you're sitting at 400, that's the year where you swallow really hard going, well, how do we go from 400 to $800 million this year? And it's clearly not in the way that we've done it in the past. So you'll live through a bunch of those no matter how you grow and scale. So the first is just, I would have you sit back, try to frame, hey, my current investors, my current board, the people that I'm going to go pitch to, what's kind of the expectation of how this thing ramps, how quickly, what makes this exciting, and what is possible. So I would frame meaning, what's this available market? So if the available market's 25 million, you're not going to say, well, I'm going to have $20 million in revenue. You have to frame and look and say, how quickly am I going to get there? What's reasonable? And so that's me just kind of saying, well, how big is this target? What's the bullseye look like? And, how much of that I can get. So that's a broad piece in budgeting that just says, what's the trajectory of growth? What does the growth look like year over year? And what's going to appease our internal team? So for you guys, you have to look and say, there's a piece of that as well, Ellie, which is, hey, do I have an expectation of payout one day? What will excite me and motivate the team? And are we all driven toward, I call it the vision of the future. So are we looking at, this is, a lifestyle business, this is rapid growth, and we're going to turn it around through private equity in a year. All of those things dictate how quickly and where kind of the base level, how steep that climb is. And that helps you kind of frame everything else from there. So that's first. Second is look at a bunch of options around modeling, and hopefully just in the sales piece, you go do that with your service piece, with your tech piece, and in conjunction with that sales ramp growth business case pitch, you step away and say, all right, well, what would overstaffing look like? Meaning in our wildest dreams, if I could have this staff, this would make it awesome. And then slowly creep away from that and say, great, realizing one, I'm most likely not going to get that pipe dream raise to go build the world and a kingdom that I want. And the second is, if I did, I'm going to be diluted to a place that I'm no longer excited about. So there will always be a healthy tension there, and rightly so. You want to do the right thing. I always frame to all the people inside my company, I go, pretend you got 2 mortgages on your house. Everything you have is tied up in this company. And what decision would you make? Meaning, if I asked you, would you do this or that? Remember that you got everything in your life tied up here. And would you spend the dollar? Would you make this decision? Would you do? And that's the healthy place to be as a early stage owner, saying, I got a bunch of competing priorities, and walk that tightrope. So long-winded way of saying, model what you can, look and say, what would overstaffing look like? Start there and say, well, what does that look like against the revenue projections we have? And look and say, hey, I'm 80% confident that's enough. Look at that and say, what does that model look like? And if the model is doable, viable, sellable, that would be my recommendation. Realizing that 1, you're probably not going to get the total raise. 2, you will be potentially more diluted. Living through this a bunch of times, the whole bootstrapping thing seems awesome. It's a ton more work. And hindsight always showed me, man, I would have been better to get a little more, be a little more diluted and have the resources to succeed versus always saying, man, I need more resource. that's the tightrope. I would urge you to look at that tightrope and say, yeah, if I can get the funding and I can sell the model, the pitch, then ask for it, get it, and start to make my life easier. Because the other thing, back to my harnessing the power of your herd, the stronger your team, the easier the work. So, and you're living that and understand that probably more than any of the listeners right now, which is, this is hard work. And the more talent you have on your team, it's the old adage, more hands, lighter work. And the better brains, the better minds, the better advisors, pull that together, look at what an overstaffing model would look like. And then it's not too early to start thinking about things like, well, when I hire, who am I hiring? Who do I have in the network? What will I need? Where are the very best people I can find for the funds that I have? And start to think from a philosophical standpoint, at least, what's the magnet that attracts people to the B Corp? Because you're not going to be able to pay more than the guy up the street, most likely. And so there's got to be, I call it a vision value pull, that you create this magnet that people want to come to the B Corp. And so that's an aside from budgeting, but it makes that budgeting easier, meaning I'm not going to have to compete on price alone. That I have some inherent value, team, culture, atmosphere that people go, man, I want to be with Ellie and her team because they're doing some cool stuff. That is just an added third piece to think about philosophically, and how would we go about it. So I'll pause and have you reflect on those and say, yeah, Dave, hey, those hit home, but I still have this big hole, or any questions that come to mind.
So, and just for those two things, that was prepping for the pitch, really thinking about your growth rate and what you want to do there, and then options around modeling and kind of overstaffing in your mind a little bit, and then backing off from that, because it's better to have tons of great minds pulling things together than not enough resources.
Yeah, I think we have a really good understanding of what our investors are expecting. And we've even talked to investors we want to bring in the next round and have gotten an idea from them on what they want revenue to look like. Come back to me with this revenue and I'm in, that kind of conversation. So I think that part is clear. And I think what we've missed is the modeling, because we can take what we've done so far and figure out how to extrapolate it. So we talked about in a lot of detail how we do that in sales. And I think that was a really helpful conversation for me. I'm even thinking on the tech side, I know the output of my data science team. I know what they've been able to build since June. So I know, okay, can we get to our 2019 dev goal with those two, or do we need to add? I think that will be really helpful, that modeling side, because I think it's definitely doable. I mean, we as well, we want a really hands-on business with our customer. It's very important in agriculture to be people on the other side of the phone. You don't see a lot of ad companies with chatbots. Will never be that. That means people. That even might mean people on the ground, on the fields, field reps, that kind of thing. So that's been really helpful.
And that's part of where your service model, like Dave was talking about, okay, what are you going to be? What level of service model? Well, you're going to be a higher level of service model because you want to be real and you think that's going to connect with the client. So that totally makes sense.
Well, where I was going to push a little here is that all that modeling as well helps you solidify the pitch. Meaning you're going to walk in and say, here's the revenue we're going to have, and you're going to have great data on here's how we think we're going to get to the revenue. And then you're going to ask for some dollars. And every investor in the room is going to go, well, how are you going to spend the money? And if you go, well, here's what it is, that's different than saying, well, we've modeled our tech level, our service level, and our sales level. And we know based on the data that we have already, we're going to need X, Y, and Z plus great leadership on top of it. So that's why I'm asking for this much, because this is what we need to do it well. That's a much different conversation and a much more confident investor saying, because there's two questions they always ask, which is, hey, am I in concept? I believe this is going to succeed. And the second is, they're asking for this much at this value. How are they going to spend my money? And is my money really going to work? And is there a high likelihood that this is the right amount, right valuation? And so the more detail the model you have, and it sounds like you have the early components of it, solidify that, because one, it helps you build that model. So if you already have expectation, now you need to go support the ask. And supporting the ask will be based on, I need $4 million of spend over the next 3 years, and here's why I need it. If you can point to that model and say, hey, what we already know is X, Y, Z, tech level, service level, sales level, and here's our known fact, and you do the little subtle thing that I just said, which is, hey, I have an estimate that I was able to convert these accounts. I know that the average sales rep isn't going to have my passion, my experience, my product knowledge, my X. So I'm therefore saying they won't be that effective. I'm not going to have to pay the same rate, meaning I'll get it cheaper, but they're also not going to be as effective.
Okay. So we've got about 3 minutes left. I think we've got 2 suggestions. David, do you have a third?
Yeah, the third was it's not too early to think about the impact of culture and what do you want intentionally. I call it building the magnet. So building and fueling this magnet around our vision of the future. How do we all act and behave at the B Corp? And how do you start to attract that talent even before you have the funds for it? So think of sports team. Hey, I got a bench of people that are ready to go into the game, even though I don't have the authority to be even in the game yet, meaning that I'm not hiring, but I'm already starting to look for talent. I'm already creating a magnet of talent. I'm already creating an awareness through my network of board, investors, others, that this B Corp is going somewhere. They got a vibe that I'm interested in. Their mission, calling, vision of the future is something I want to be part of. All that makes when you go to turn on the hire, a whole lot easier. And sometimes we don't think about that. I challenge leaders to do that even before you start the company. So never too early to think about where am I going, meaning vision of future. How do I want my people to act and behave? What are our robust core values that we're going to hire to? So when you hire, you have a lens. And I don't think it hurts to spell that out in your pitch as well, which is, here's the vision of where we're going, to add to the financial piece. They're going to care about it, but they're also going to want a flavor for who is B Corp, why do we care, and what's the attraction for all the people, both internal and external, that are going to come to B Corp. So that's a subtle piece that's aside from your business model. There may be some subtlety in your business model cost budget side where you go, I'm going to fund some of that, because I think it's critical. You look across organizations that do remarkable things, they have remarkable cultures.
And that's something I think you and I've met quite a lot about, and something we've wanted to build. I think the fact that we're doing analytics on bees has made it really easy to find analytics people, because there's not a lot of analytics companies doing things other than marketing analytics. But I'm thinking from the sales and customer support perspective, what about what we're doing is sexy and attractive? And I think that's something that we want to think through. And I love what David said about how the models can build that other side of the pitch, because I think absolutely, we know revenue, but we don't know cost to get there. And that's how you show an investor you've got a repeatable, scalable model. So yeah.
Absolutely. Gives them confidence and says, yeah, I want to invest.
All right, y'all. We are out of time. I want to take a couple of minutes though, Ellie, and just get your feedback on where are you at right now? What did you hear? And you kind of did that just a second ago, but what were some of the things, maybe the big takeaways from this conversation?
I definitely didn't realize how much we have right now that we could use for budgeting. How we're using Pipedrive right now, obviously to keep me organized, but to report KPIs month over month, right? Are we hitting sales goals? It also helps me know if I'm going to get to 12 to 15 people. I know how many people I have to call. We're using it more on the sales side, but we're not looking at it in a macro sense and look at how much time is this going to take. So I love that suggestion. And I love the suggestion of using our time and models now, which, since we're on a grant, we track all of our time. So I know exactly how much time people are spending towards dev. And that's why I know how much customer support takes, because we used to support products. And that's super helpful. And I think that's really going to help Wyatt and I finish this part of the budget out. And definitely, I think the culture piece is really sharp and something I want to think more about. We've started to put feelers out there that we are interested. We will be hiring more, and especially because I honestly think, David, at some point we're going to want someone who has a lot of experience in the ag space as well. So we've started to try to work those networks. But all of this has been really helpful because, when we've budgeted in the past for raises, we didn't have as much data and the ability to use that data. Now we have all these software tools that track your productivity, and I love the idea of turning those on their head and helping.
And actually using them for, something that helps you out. Okay.
Yeah, projections, yeah.
David, any last thoughts from you?
Yeah, the only last thing I had when you were talking there is as you pull, of course, pitch together, the budget together, throw it. I used to say, who are all the safe eyes I can show this to? Meaning it doesn't hurt my effort, that I can get unbiased, unfiltered, real guidance that doesn't hurt me if I'm wrong. So I had what I called my safe eyes team, and I go, man, I just want you to take a peek at this. So I would think about that and say, hey, as I put the first couple together and go, hey, who can do this in a way that doesn't get back to somebody I'm worried about it getting back to, and think about, hey, who could be on my team there that can help me say, wow, Ellie, you're way out of touch here, and get grounded before, you're in front of a group of investors and they go, hey, you're way out of touch here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's always just a valuable, where's my dry run that's truly a dry run, not that somebody in there matters.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to have to cut it off right there. Ellie, thank you so much for being willing to come on the show, share your crossroads, where you're at. I hope it was helpful and really meaningful for you.
It was. Thank you so much.
And David, as always, thank you so much for sharing your ideas, thoughts, and expertise with our listening community.
Thanks, guys. Enjoyed it as always.
All right. Special thanks to Ellie Symes for taking the time to share the B Corps story with us. Contributors to the episode were me, Jeremy Goodrich, the producer. David Quick was our co-host and expert extraordinaire. You can find him at helpingbulls.com. Ellie Symes you can find at bcorp.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, there's a couple of things we need you to do right now. First, it is subscribe to Scratch Entrepreneur on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever you listen to podcasts. While you're there, please review the show. Mostly give David lots of positive feedback because he loves that. And share it with your friends. And finally, please do join our Scratch Entrepreneur Facebook group. Until the next time, we truly appreciate you listening.